welcome to Sippin On Country. We are back, and I am so happy to have the lovely Trisha McClanahan.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Of course.
So, Trisha is artist manager. You've done a lot in your career.
Well, work-wise, yes, I have done a few things.
So let's rewind.
Okay.
So you've been in the music industry for what, 20 years?
No, since 87. So 30-something years.
There we
That's
go.
a lot of, yeah.
So has that all been in Nashville?
Yeah, all been in Nashville. I grew up around here, so...
You're a unicorn.
I'm a unicorn. There's 3 of us, I guess, left. And I grew up around here, but I went to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And I wanted to get into concert promotions. But at UT, there was no music business per se. It probably would have been smarter to stay near home and go to one of these programs. But I didn't. So I majored in advertising, which was the closest thing to promotions, I thought. Came back to Nashville in 87, and I worked for Del Morris & Associates, which managed Alabama at the time.
Okay.
Now it's morphed into Morris Hyam, right? Clint Hyam's
Mm-hmm.
business with Kenny Chesney, and so I had my start there.
And so when you started there, what were you doing?
Oh, I was answering phones. I was a girl Friday. I was doing anything. This is in the days before computers,
Right.
I remember we got a fax machine. It was like state of the art. How does that work? And it's I mean, this was in the late 80s, like I said, 87. Right. So I started there. Dell was fantastic. They did in-house promotion. So all those huge Alabama tours, we promoted inside. So I was able to learn a lot about the concert business.
Right.
That's what I wanted.
I feel like there's a lot of people in town where they're like, my first job was just on the desk, like answering
Yeah,
phones.
of
But I
course.
mean, that's where you meet all the people,
Right.
people coming into the office, you're speaking to them.
Yeah.
I mean, when you got that job, did you kind of have a clear idea of where you wanted to end up?
I did not. I was so happy to get a job in the music business.
Just be there.
And I had been temping at places and freelancing a little bit and just sort of knew somebody who recommended me for that job. And I think it was great to be answering the phones because it taught me that no matter what you're doing, do that well, be the best at that, and you'll find a way.
Yep.
The path will appear, which has sort of been the essence of my career.
And then, so after that, what was the turning point from that? Like, when did you go from answering the phones to taking that step up?
Yeah, well, there was a guy that worked on the promotion side of that world, Trey Turner, and Trey had left to work with Reba McEntire, had opened her own office with her husband, Narvel Blackstock. Mm-hmm. And Trey had gone there to do the in-house concert promotions there, like he had done it with Alabama. And he called me one day after he'd been over there for a while and asked me, if I would come over and do the advertising for them. And that was in the early 90s. I went over to Reba in 90. So, during the course of the 90s, she had the biggest tours in the country format, at least. And we had all these trucks and buses and costume changes and dancers. And it was so exciting. And advertising the tours now is about social media.
Right. I mean, it's a whole different world. I feel like even just in the last 10 years, the way that everything, especially with stuff like that and social media, TikTok and everything.
Yeah, it's put on the artist now to do it. You know?
100%.
Right. That's really how that happens. Yeah.
So you were out on the road doing the advertising?
Well, then I wasn't, I wasn't on the road that much in the beginning. I was advertising the tours in terms of setting up radio promotions and handbills and radio ads and newspaper ads I ran. I mean, this is like pre-computer days, how we would promote those shows. And we had these huge tours. And as part of that, sometimes when Reba would have a sponsor, I would sort of be the sponsor liaison for some programs. And I kind of worked that into, hey, let me bring in sponsors. Let me initiate the sponsorship programs. And then that turned into, eventually I ended up VP of marketing, anyway, it's a long story, but I did a lot of other things there. But it all was because of, if you're answering the phones, also do it, do the to the best of your ability. Right. Do the next thing. So.
And I mean, once people know your name, I feel like that's also just a big part of it. Like, regardless of what role you're on. And I actually was just speaking about this with my other guest, is that you can really never discount anyone. You know, you could go to a studio and the person that's in there, like, doing the teas and coffees, give it 20 years and they could be, like, the head of
Absolutely.
some, you know, and I mean, perfect example. And there's plenty of people like that. I mean, so you studied advertising.
Mm-hmm.
You ended up in that role. I mean, obviously at some point that took a turn because now you're in artist management.
Right.
How long were you at Starstruck for?
I was at Starstruck 20 years.
Wow.
20 years. And, you know, it seems like a long time, but because of Reba and the huge bandwidth that is, there was so much, you know, I was able to work on promotions for a Broadway show, for a TV show, for movies, for books, you know, so much that Reba did beyond just concert. But I brought the clothing line I did to her. I was going to
ask about that.
Yeah. A designer in New York reached out to me and had this idea, and I kind of liaisoned that whole thing and all the brand extensions and hired people in the field, and Reba and Narvel were great, and I just sort of became, you know, a team with them and making all that happen. And then somewhere along that path, I became friends with Kelly Clarkson, and we brought her in for management, and I became part of that management team with Narvel. Okay. So that's when I really got in more the management side. With Reba, a lot of the things I did were day-to-day maybe.
Right,
you know?
Okay.
But with Kelly's where I really got into the management side, yeah.
I think it's interesting because, and that's, you know, really kind of the whole point of the podcast, is that people see, you know, you see Reba's tours, you see the sponsorships, and from someone going out and paying tickets to go to a show or buying clothing, you know, you really don't see how it all materializes in the first place, which I think is really, really interesting. So for you, for that change from, I mean, that sounds like a huge change in job roles from going from
you
that
know,
to...
I will say that it was never so much a change as just an adding on. It feels like throughout my career at Starstruck, it was like, yeah, you can keep doing that, but then add this on. Well, and because I wanted to do it. You know, I wanted to be part of Kelly's team, and I wanted to still be a part of the Reba team with the brand extensions. So I did it all. I mean, it was a lot for a long time. And there was a lot. That's when I was really on the road a lot, you know, but also working in the office.
When did you join Kelly's team?
2007, probably.
Okay, so she'd had kind of that 6-7 years being out there as an artist. So she was pretty well established by the time you jumped on board with that.
Yeah.
So I mean, what was the main stuff, I guess, you were working with her? You say you were out on the road sometimes, but it was...
Yeah, on the road, particularly with album promotions internationally, shows.
So you got to travel a lot, like world travel.
Worldwide, yeah.
I mean, how was that? Because I think there's always, from an outside perspective, there's always, oh, this is so glamorous. You get to go to this city and this city. But, I mean, in reality, when you're kind of travelling around and you've got that work aspect of it.
Yeah, it's not as glamorous, you know, as one would think, for sure. Because a lot of it is you are working. Sometimes you don't see anything but the venue. Sometimes, you know, depending on what your day's like, then the venue becomes your office for the day, and it doesn't matter if you're in Brussels or Paris, right?
Just another
it's just another venue. Place, right? So there's that, but it's also a lot of times there's fun stuff, and there are days off, and there's great things to do, and I don't think that it's ever glamorous, but it's more like traveling with your friends,
right? And I guess you build up that rapport when you're working with people day to day. I mean, to be fair, that's how we met. Back in the day. So back in the day. It wasn't that long.
But we were in England, right?
We were, that was, I think at the BBC, I want to say it was at the BBC studios.
Yeah.
And that would move on to the artist you ended up. I assume that was after Kelly was a...
Oh, I left Starstruck in let me think, 2010.
Okay.
So I really wanted to run my own shop, you know. I love Reba and Narvel both, and I still have a great relationship with both of them. I learned so much there. But I just sort of wanted to be my own shop, you know?
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's the natural kind of step.
Yeah, it's sort of the natural progression of that. And I did, and I worked with a lot of great artists. Scotty McCreery, Lisa Marie Presley. I did a lot of different things. I had a Christian band for 4 or 5 years. But at 2014, I guess, I signed Alaina and ended up with her for 9 years, and we had a list of goals, and we achieved them all. I mean, it was really a great run with her.
And I think, speaking just about that social media stuff and how stuff has changed, I think that's where a lot of people would know you from, because that relationship that you and Lauren had on social media.
Right.
I mean, that was a big part of it. And I feel like it really showed how much of an impact you kind of had on that management role.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, Lauren was 18 or 19 when I first started working with her. So you're really, growing with that person. And one of our goals was to get over 1 million followers. So that was social media. I don't always want to be a part of that, but
so you can't hide anything.
Yeah,
Once it's out there, it's out there.
Exactly.
I mean, from starting with an artist that's kind of very new like that, is that something that you prefer to, like, obviously you came in with Katie Clarkson when she was a little more established. Lauren was kind of, I mean, off the back of American Idol, but still just starting out. I mean, do you have a preference on
the thing about Lauren that was so attractive to me is, and I always say I came up in that Reba camp and I was probably spoiled by it, because I've to this day never met anyone with her work ethic and with her driven, and but also that she had the ability to do all these different things. A lot of artists could only do the touring or can only do the studio. I mean, with Reba, she's putting out books and and movies, and I mean, it was all these different avenues and platforms that you could utilize. And Lauren was the first person that I had met that I felt like, even as a young girl, she could be a lifestyle. She could be a brand.
She just really...
Yeah.
And I think it seems like it's hard to find that. I mean, there's a reason that Reba, even now, I mean, she's still a household name. And to keep yourself in that public eye for so long, it's not easy. It's the industry chews you and spits you out very quickly.
Yeah.
And so I think to keep there, and that must have been amazing to be able to learn in that environment. You had so many bits. And your management company is called?
McClanahan Management.
Okay. And so you are no longer with Lauren.
Right. Lauren and I parted ways. My decision. But yeah, we're still great friends. And
I mean, what are you kind of working? Have you got other artists that you're kind of bringing on?
I'm talking to people. I'm really have taken a little bit of a break and kind of regrouped. I kind of hit getting close to a magical age where I feel like, let me, and I don't, a lot of the things that we talked about that are so difficult early on, I don't necessarily want to do all those things anymore. Right. So I have a time to be a little selective. And so right now I'm just kind of taking a little break, talking to different artists and figuring out.
And it also sounds like you're pretty much, I mean, from that first job back in 87, like it sounds like you've pretty much just been on it the entire time, So it's nice to be able to take a little step back.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you've got your company, but from everything you've done, has management been like the kind of favourite area of the business that you've been in so far?
I love doing deals, but the thing about management, and it's a lot of deal making, I kind of see myself as a steward of dreams, right? And so as a manager, you're able to sit with the artists and figure out what their dreams are. And with Lauren, she wanted to be a member of the Grand Ole Opry. She wanted to have a fan club. She wanted to have a foundation. It's like we were able to discuss what all her dreams were and work on those and make those come true. And that's what I really love.
Right.
As a manager, you do that. You're part of the whole picture rather than just myopically.
And again, I think that's something, people from the outset don't see, is exactly what goes into that, like, day-to-day management, because it's not just one thing.
Right.
You're, like you say, you're kind of helping build that artist to be who they are and kind of who they become. And without management, I mean, I think it's probably fair to say that a lot of artists, they lean much more towards that entertainment, and they're there to entertain. They're not necessarily there to handle the business side of things. So I mean, just as not necessarily just with Lauren, but just kind of as a whole, like, what would you say the top things are that an artist manager is doing kind of behind the scenes that is not seen by?
Right. Well, what you're talking about, the person is being entertainment. I mean, they're creatives, right? And then they're business people. And for the creatives, I find that they can become very stressed about record label meetings or having to sign contracts or any of that kind of business oriented thing. And to be fair, the whole thing runs because of their talent and their God-given, ability. Yep. So my role as a manager is to take away all the other stressful things, to do all these other things so they can focus on just being creative.
I mean, that must be hard as well. I mean, you say like with contracts and stuff, but I mean, ultimately whoever you're with, I mean, they have to trust you 100% to get, for you to say, hey, look, there's this contract, like, this is good for you. I mean,
right.
that's a lot of pressure for you to have,
right?
I
thought of it that way. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, but I mean, that's part of the management relationship. You have to trust that this person is going to be dealing with your booking agent and is going to decide how much money you're worth, and if you're able to do this and not overstretch your schedule. Yeah, I mean, it is
there's so many moving parts. I say that I think you don't necessarily think about it, and probably, to be fair, probably you don't think about it, having done it for so long. There's just stuff you kind of go around and and get done. But from being on the road, like where's your favourite place that you've ever been able to kind of go around and visit?
Oh, maybe Dublin.
Okay. Lots of cider, lots of Guinness.
Yeah, Guinness. It's great. It's funny because I went to Dublin with Lauren, and Reba told me do the Guinness factory, which I would never think to do, right? But she was so right. I don't know if you've done it. It's fantastic.
I haven't. I've only been to Dublin once, and I think I might have gone bankrupt from it.
Oh, I know. It's crazy, right? But it's a beautiful place. I love Amsterdam too. There's some great places in the States too, but like I said, a lot of times you're just in the venue and you don't get a chance.
Yeah, I mean, before you're on the bus, you're you drive to the next place, and it's a very like heavy tour schedule.
Yeah,
I guess, I mean, maybe coming with like some of the older artists seems to be where a lot of people who are working in those camps tend to see a little more of the place because the schedules tend to not be so packed.
Right, true. Well, and probably the reasons I'm drawn to more of the European things is because you have days off there because you're over there for, a month or whatever. Right. And you do have days off. But if you're traveling here in the States, you're doing 2 nights and then you wake up at home the next morning. So.
Which is always nice, though.
Yeah.
Everyone loves their home comforts, as nice as it is to be out and about.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of artists, do you find yourself particularly leaning towards Kelly Clarkson, she's kind of crossed over a lot of genres now and definitely crossed into that country side of things. But do you see yourself sitting within the country industry at this point?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love pop. I mean, Kelly's far outgrew me a long time ago, and what she's done has been absolutely phenomenal. For me, country was really the reason I wanted to be in Nashville, and I'm really drawn to that. But now country's become such a broad thing. I think certainly Taylor Swift has showed us, that people can be drawn to that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she regardless of, I know there's two sides of the camps for Taylor Swift for sure, but she may not be in the country sort of scene now, but I mean, she has done a huge amount, especially in those early days as she was kind of making that move.
Absolutely.
To bring people over.
And she's a storyteller, and that's what the country thing is.
Yep.
Morgan Wallen, I think, arguably one of the best artists of the year. I mean, I think the appeal of the format is massive.
Yeah. I mean, so from working through, 3 decades, 2.5.
Oh my
2
gosh.
decades. Sorry,
3 decades. Yeah,
2.5. 2.5.
No, it's 3.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
And it's 3. How have you seen the industry change from, how you go about managing? Because, I mean, even just in the last 5-10 years, I see stuff changing all the time. I mean, my day job, I kind of work behind the scenes with a record label, and even that, like every day, just the way that people get their information and they get payments and stuff. It's a whole thing. But I feel like trying to roll with all those changes in the way that people receive that info, 10, 15 years ago, when people were, I don't know, maybe they're going, they're buying magazines. I mean, who's buying magazines anymore?
Right.
Now you're competing with, tens of thousands of people on a social media platform that just popped up yesterday, and you kind of have to be an expert in it from day one.
Yeah, there's so many messages now, right? And people are getting them from all different ways. Like I said in the beginning, when I was advertising, promoting concerts, I would go to a market, I would call the program director for the radio station, call the newspaper, maybe TV, It was just a formula. And each market was individualized. But now, I think the biggest shift is that it falls on the artist. The artist has to do all this social media, and even if someone's facilitating that for them, it's got to be the artist's voice, it's got to be the artist's face.
Right, you can't go onto someone's TikTok and be like, hey, this is so-and-so's TikTok. Like, I mean, people are just going to be like, what is this?
Yeah, so that, the responsibility, the weight of all that has shifted to the artist, and if we knew what the magic dust was, we would put it on all of them.
Yeah.
But especially in the social media, you don't know when Walker Hayes is going to have this TikTok dance with his daughter that takes off, right?
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, now we've got to jump on this.
Now everyone's going to do that, yeah.
Or there's some, some viral video from the other side of the world that all of a sudden, Yeah. It's like, I mean, you have to be on it, and I think...
I'm sorry, but I was just going to add to that it used to be that you would be in an on cycle and an off cycle with albums and press. And when, you had a product coming out, you do all your press and do all the things around that. Then the artist got a break and you kind of kept them out of the media to give that a break. And that was the same in the pop world too. Mm-hmm. But now you cannot take that time away.
Do you think that's made it a lot harder
for
artists in the industry? Because, you're not getting that break. Mm-hmm. And I mean... It's very much, it's a passion, right? There is, people love doing it. It's not necessarily work. I mean, everything becomes work to a point, but people love doing it, but still not being able to have that break, not being able to just switch off. Because, I mean, you disappear from social media for 2 weeks. Everyone's like, oh my God, what's happened to this?
Yeah, that's over. Next, they found someone else. But it feels like you have to be so mentally strong to do that, for one. But you also, when young people come in and talk to me, or I go and speak to a college or whatever, and they want to do it on the creative side, I would not wish it on anyone. You only need to do that if you have no choice, that you are so determined and so driven, and that's your passion and you calling, and you've got to do it. Because otherwise, it is hard. And fame is so hard. Yeah.
It's definitely not the glamorous life that I think a lot of people see it as. I mean, you've got to be thick-skinned, again, especially with social media. You put one thing out there, you're going to have, for the handful of people that are going to be like, this is amazing, there's a whole other load of people that are just, they're going to just be horrible people.
And some people just do it because they want the response, and they will get it. The negativity gets a response.
It does.
Yeah, that is a horrible way, and there is no break from it now. There is no, like, let me do this crunch time and get this album out. It's like you said, you can't disappear. Yeah.
I mean, even albums, I feel like people are stepping back, and now it's like, we'll do an EP. Let's release multiple.
Keep music coming out.
Yeah, because you can't stop. There's just no.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that's sustainable?
That's a good point. I think it's sustainable, but I don't think we're building the level of stars that we used to, maybe. It feels like there are a few giant superstars. There's Luke Combs, and there's Morgan Wallen, among the new people, and then there's a lot of people down here. But the sustainability of that middle level, I don't know.
It seems like it's so...
They're replaceable. They just go to the next person. Yeah.
And actually, that's something I talk about all the time, is that you kind of... We're kind of in a time now where a lot of those big names and the, those legends, they're all starting to reach that age. And I kind of sit back sometimes and I look at everyone that is in the industry now. I'm like, how many of these people in 20 years are we... still, how many of them are going to maintain where they're at now?
Yeah.
Because and there's so many people coming through, because, I mean, even, again, 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, to be able to jump into the industry, I mean, you had A&R reps going out and scouting. You know, they would leave their office, they would drive somewhere, you know, and they're looking and finding that next big thing. Whereas now, there's so much competition that
and
it's
analytics have gone into it so much, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of leaving their office, they're just looking at the TikTok numbers.
Yeah.
I mean,
it actually, to a point, is this person any good? Doesn't necessarily. I mean, it factors into it to a point. Yeah. But you know, you could have someone on TikTok that's got 100 followers and you know, maybe gets like 5 or 6 likes on all their videos, might sing or play or, you know, entertain the best of, like, you know, the best of the best, but they haven't got the numbers, so they're not even they're just gonna get passed through. You know, whereas years ago, they might go out and play and someone would say, oh my God, I just saw this person playing. And I think that kind of goes back onto maybe the performers as well, of people, you know, you don't necessarily have to go out and play. And also, what's more beneficial at this point? Is it more beneficial to sit in your room and create content for social media, or is it more beneficial to get out and be in front of people? I think that's a...
Yeah, you could reach more people, you could argue, right, on social media. It took Reba 5 years to get her first #1, and I think now you'd be hard-pressed to find acts at labels that they will hang on to that long.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they will invest that time to make them...
a year, maybe 2, and if you haven't got anything, they're just going to...
Right. And I don't know what the answer to that is, because how is it sustainable if you did a magic dance and it went viral, then what's the next thing?
Right. There's a point where that's going to stop. So I mean, for you, do you tend to go out searching for clients, or for, as most part, will people come to you? Kind of, where are you at?
People come to me. A lot of, you know, people referred to me. But I'm on top of social media, you know, and I look at the numbers as much as anyone does. And, you know, I have 2 nieces that are 21 and 17, and I hear what they're listening to. One of my favorite jokes is my 21-year-old niece was telling me about Zach Bryan a few years ago. And I said, who are you? Are you talking about Luke Bryan? I mean, I had no idea. Are you talking about Zach Brown? I mean, you know, but these kids all know what is breaking before we do.
100%. And then, well, now everyone knows.
Yeah.
Now everyone knows the name.
Exactly.
But it's a really, I feel like it's a really wild time just to be part of it.
Yeah.
I say, like, every day it feels like those goalposts are changing as to where you've kind of got to reach to.
Right.
When you say you go out to, like, colleges and stuff and speak about it.
Well, yeah, sometimes,
So how often, I guess, do you go out and speak to kids, and do you feel like they kind of have a grasp of what the industry kind of is from that standpoint? You know, they see it all and they see the TikTok and they understand that, oh, like, if we can get all these followers, but do you think they truly kind of see the industry, if that makes sense?
I don't know. Yeah, I know what you're saying. It feels like, I mean, I don't want to be some old fogey that makes generalizations about the youth of today, but I feel like with some people, they feel like they put the time in and I've got my degree now, let's go. Or I've got, you know what I mean? I have 100,000 people on TikTok, so let's go. Let me get I met with a guy recently, and I was encouraging him to move to Nashville. He didn't live in Nashville, but he's like, I live in this state, and I do great. I'm like, well, it's like you want to play for the Atlanta Braves, but you live in Philadelphia.
Right.
You know?
Well, I can just travel to Atlanta like every now and then when they want me to train.
Right. I mean, I still believe that the Nashville is a community. You and I were talking before the camera, you know, started about what a small town it is, and that one person leads to another person. And when I look back on my career at this stage of 3 decades, we said, or whatever later, I think, to me, it's all been about the relationships. It's not been about the work.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to at the end. You know, you can have these viral videos, but if you can't maintain that relationship, and if you can't be there, I think that's the other thing with, you know, especially within country music, like, unless you've established yourself to a good point. I mean, I know there's a handful of artists that they live in Texas rather than being in Nashville, But I mean, they can, because they're at a point where,
and that's almost, to be honest, a separate business in Texas, right?
Is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people, you know, who they can be somewhere else, because it doesn't matter at this point. But when you're starting out, whether it be, I think just in any area of it, you need to be in front of people, and you need to have people seeing your face. And I think, just actually getting to know people on that personal level,
right,
as opposed to this persona that they're putting out. I think it's very, very different, and something that's maybe getting a little harder to do.
Well, I think the pandemic sort of set us all back, right? When I first was working for Del Morris in the late 80s, every Friday it felt like the publishers were having a block party outside, and people would just walk up and down those alleys on Music Row, and you'd see Rodney Crowell, who had 4 number ones on one album at the time, you know, playing on his little stage. And now those things happen occasionally, but they're once every 6 months or once a year. They're not bi-weekly or, you know, every other week like they used to be. And that was a good way to have the community. But with pandemic, and we all stayed home, I don't think a lot of us ever went back out, you know. So
how did that change for you from a management perspective, having to deal with an industry that, I mean, was essentially it was completely shut down. You know, the only things that were happening were social media, because you didn't have to be next to someone. I mean, did that change your perspective on, I guess, just management in general?
I will say that was one of the most challenging years, but one of the years I loved the most, because we met all those challenges. It's probably financially one of the best years we had, and it was because we found other ways to make it work, you know? And I tried everything, and a lot of things didn't work. You know, a lot of people did these virtual concerts. You did different things with sponsorships. We did cooking shows, a lot of virtual stuff, a lot of sponsorship stuff. But to me, it was sort of interesting, because it stripped back a lot of acoustic kind of things to really get to who can sing. And there wasn't a whole lot you could have to put up and go. There was no production. You couldn't have it. Do you think that, you know, obviously that was not a great time for anyone, but I mean, coming out of that, do you think that it has bettered you from a management perspective, like bringing in those kind of new ideas about how you deal with things? We never want to be in that situation again, right?
But you know, taking kind of all that from there, do you think it's changed now how you would manage going forward?
Well, I think it just is sort of it was a good spiritual test, right? A good reminder for all of us and all of humanity about what is important. And I think management-wise, the same. What is it about the artists that when you get down to it, I think that was your Lauren wrote her book, you know? Okay, yeah. It was like, how do you really pare down to what is important to the artist? But where it was less tough on me than it probably was the creative side of the creative people, because they're so used to getting that feedback.
Right.
And there was no feedback. That's the worst part of all these virtual things. Yeah. Yeah,
that was kind of wild. It was very interesting from a consumer standpoint to see how people kind of utilize that.
Yeah. But to me, there was also a fear of, would we go back to live music? And obviously we have, and it's bigger than ever. But at the time, I'm thinking, why are we giving away our livelihood? Because you're always so conscious in contracts and security to not let people film shows. And here we're filming them and putting them up for free, you know? But we've all gone back out. It's all been fine.
Yeah, and thankfully, I feel like the industry, when it kind of started to open back, there was, you know, all that hesitancy. And I mean, it's amazing now. It's so good to see.
Yeah,
see what it's come back to. It almost feels like COVID didn't happen.
Yeah.
In terms of just the way people are. And I'll be honest, I wasn't entirely sure we were going to get to that point.
Agree.
You know, because I would go out and everyone was very standoffish, and like, I'm very sociable. Like, I like being with people.
Right.
And I was like, I had to remind myself when I went places, I'm like, don't hug people, don't shake their hands, like, stand back.
Well, and the first time those things happened, it did feel weird, right?
Yeah.
I remember people trying to shake my hand again, and I thought, because we had gone for a year, 18 months without doing it.
Right. And you're like, no, it's okay. Like, that's okay. And then I'd be like, wait, no, I've done it now. Like, is it okay?
I know. And then you just think there's no replacing the live experience.
No.
Yeah.
There's not. You can't, as much as you can put out on social media and you can do, you know, virtual live shows, that nothing replaces being somewhere and just having that whole, it's the atmosphere. 'Cause it's the atmosphere that makes it, you know, it's why people go to shows and they don't sit at home and listen to a record.
Yes, you know, that shared experience. Yeah. It's why you go to exercise classes, you know?
Yeah.
That shared experience sort of elevates everything.
100%.
And then that's why someone like Lauren will always succeed, because she is so good on stage, and why a lot of these TikTok people will not translate into ticket sales because you can't. Yeah. Yeah, it's one thing being in your room.
You need to be able to have the rapport. I know for me, when I go and see a show, I want to feel like I'm the only person in the room. Right. You know, that's...
And don't you always walk away thinking, he was looking at me? Yeah, I swear he was looking in my eyes. Yeah.
That's what you want. You want
everyone feels that way.
That personal connection that you don't get any other way, and you don't get it from social media, where I think is really where it's lacking. But going back, I know you were saying, you know, back in the 80s when people were much more accessible, late 80s, early 90s, have you got any just fun stories? Like, when you think of that time, is there anything that just stands out to you about...
Oh my gosh, no. I mean, I'm sure none that I'm going to share. Yeah, but I do think then fame was a byproduct of what these artists did, you know, and it wasn't the goal of what these artists did, but it also felt like when a superstar walked in, it was like you could hear the music, you know, almost, and see the aura. Now social media puts everybody in your bedroom, you know, at night. So there's not that specialness.
And I think that's probably a lot where it shifted. I mean, when you're speaking with artists that want to come on board with you, that I think, you know, there are a lot of people that they're like, well, I want to be famous. How do I be like? Yeah. I want to be famous, and this is something that I'm good at. So, you know, we'll just kind of merge those two together. But is that something you look for when you are bringing people onto your roster of, you know, you want the people that they don't care about the fame, or that it's not there in the forefront. You want the people who, first and foremost, their artistry and their talent is what is, you know, their passion.
Definitely. I think anyone that, you know, talks about wanting to be famous, or if this doesn't work, well, I'll just be an actress. Or if this does, you know, that can't. I personally can't be involved in that pursuit of fame.
That's fair. Now, I will say, back in the UK, I actually had a friend, long time ago, I did this talent show, and my coach, he was very much one of these people that he didn't care how he did it. He's like, I just want to be famous. Yeah. And fair play to him. He's now a TV presenter, and he is doing incredible. But his goal from day one was be famous.
Well, you usually will succeed at whatever you state your goal is. But the thing about the fame part of it is you can never turn it off. Mm-hmm. I mean, you open that bag and
it's no turning back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, I actually think the country music industry as a whole is a lot better. You know, for like pop artists. I mean, mainly, I guess a lot of those artists are living New York, LA. Yeah. And that media coverage is a lot more intense. Yeah. I think a lot of people within the country music industry, it's surprising how many people are able to keep things very closed off, which I think is nice, and something actually I really like about the genre as a whole, that, you know, people are, and even now there are certain acts, they don't mind going out and being, you know, in some of the bars in Midtown, and even going on Broadway. You know, people will do that, and sometimes I'm like, would that happen if you were in LA or New York? Right. You know, people just don't want to go out. They're like,
well, in Nashville, I do think that's one thing that we've been respectful of, even with all this growth and so many people coming in from the outside. I think we are respectful of that and not approach the artists. And it's amazing, isn't it, that we don't have paparazzi at this point?
Yeah. I love it. I remember I first started coming out here in 2009, and I think it was either then or 2010, and me and my friends were going out for lunch, and we're driving down the road, and Darius Rucker's just walking down the street, and we're like, hey, and he's like, hey. Yeah. And I remember just being like, wait, like what just happened?
Yeah.
Like, it's wild to me that no one cares. But, you know, obviously as time's gone on, I'm like, it's so refreshing. And it must be so nice to be able to be in that scenario.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you're obviously taking a little break right now.
Yeah, I've taken a little break, just a few months, and, you know, kind of figuring out, talking to people. Yeah.
So, what have you been doing in your break?
Oh my gosh, I have a little cabin in the mountains, so I've spent some time up there. I've traveled a little bit, hiked the Grand Canyon. And,
saw that. That looked amazing.
Yeah, so I've traveled a little bit, but just going on hikes in the mountains and reading a lot. It's been good.
Taking time for yourself.
Some time. Yeah.
And then I guess slowly building
I'll
back
get
up
like
and jumping back into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank
so
you.
Much.
This was
Thank
awesome,
you.
Amy.
I'm so glad you came in.
Thanks.
Everyone, Trisha McClanahan. I will make sure that I link to a little more information about you.
Okay,
And
awesome.
We'll make sure people go check you out. Guys, we are going to be back next week. Come and join us with our next guest. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And see you soon. Recorded at 2300 Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Original theme music by Gary Wood.